Decentralized Consciousness podcast. You're listening to the Conscious Parenting series. This is another episode in the series that comes from way back in January, and I owe a big apology to Scott and Tali, who, bless them, they've had quite a low time preference in waiting for this episode to finally get released. And I know they've been really excited to get this episode out to their friends and family too. So I first heard Scott and Tali on an episode of Citadel Dispatch back in January, maybe even December. And in their conversation with Matt, they talked about their experience with homeschooling. And I got to be honest, when I first listened to that episode, I got pretty overwhelmed. There just seemed like there was so many options and possibilities. And, I had been considering homeschooling, or at least some sort of alternative form of education for my children, upon exploring the realm of consciousness and conscious parenting. And so I decided to reach out to them to ask some questions of my own, and they were able to give me a ton of great information, and I'm really excited to be sharing it with all of you today. So without further ado, enjoy. Welcome to the Bitcoin Consciousness Podcast. This is the Conscious Parenting series, and today I have with me Scott and Tali, who are both avid homeschoolers or homeschool experts, I'd say. How are you guys doing today?
Great.
Yep,
Great.
doing
Doing great.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today. So, the three of us, we spoke at length on Friday about your experience with homeschooling. And the reason that I had reached out to you guys to come on the Conscious Parenting series is because education is, like 50% of the child's life, probably more, while they are living at home, is focused on education. And in the traditional sense, they're away from home. When I'm referring to traditional education, they're away from home over half their lives. And so I think that, as my son gets older you know, and we sort of head into these educational years, that I need to start exploring and learning about these possibilities, because education is a very, very big part of our kids' lives. And I just want to make sure that I'm making the right decision. And the decision that you guys have made to homeschool your children is definitely an unpopular one. The majority of people are content with sending their kids to a public school, and they don't really question it, regardless of how the child is doing. And I think the place where I kind of wanted to start our conversation is sort of at more of like a I don't know if it's the word is hypothetical. It's maybe it's more of a higher level, which is, what is education? When you say that a person is educated, what does that mean? And how has that, if at all, different from the general acceptance of what what somebody would define as an educated person?
Okay. I'll take a crack at this first. I think I can tell you first what education is not. I would say that education is definitely not the diploma that you hold in your hand, and definitely not the name of the institution you receive the diploma from, because based on the experience of my kids having gone through college courses recently, college courses are incredibly, I don't want to say easy, but they're not challenging the intellectual thinking almost at all now. A lot of it is literally tell me your opinion and support it with other people's opinions. So I'll give an example. My daughter came home and was telling me about a paper she had to write, and the topic of the paper was about social racism prejudice, assumptions, and things like that. And she had to watch a movie and write a paper about all the stereotypical racial whatever things that they had in there and write a paper. And she read the first page to me, and I literally could not understand what her opinion was because every 3 words she had to interrupt it with, "And it's supported by this person's paper based on this and this, all these references." And at the end of a whole paper, literally, I had no idea what she thought, right? So I don't feel like higher education today are encouraging people to think original thoughts anymore. They're really just to regurgitate other people's thoughts. And the more people you can find who have the same ideas to support your idea, the stronger your idea is. But that original thinking. So that's I would start with saying higher education does not mean the diploma or the school or even the number of courses that you have completed. Alea, not Alea, sorry.
Yeah.
Scott,
Yeah,
you understand?
I took the question a little bit differently. The way I took it is if you're a parent, your job is to prepare your kids for life. And so that could be everything from hygiene to anything else. And education is meant to just prepare them for being on their own. And I think at the K through 12 level, there's a mistaken idea that somehow it's getting a high school diploma, a GED, maybe you pass a test that says that you can do things, and it's no longer about really teaching the life skills. I think at the post high school level, that's when you're trying to specialize, and it used to be that you went to school to learn something. So if you're going to be an architect or a doctor, I think it's pretty important for you to go to a university and get some real experience before you go out in the real world. But I think what we've had over time is things have now turned into almost like proof of stake, right? You just, you prove that you got into a university and that you attended, and we don't really care that what the effort was that you went through. Whereas I think the intent of what university was to actually go and learn something, and the diploma used to mean like a proof of work that you actually had a skill set, whatever it
Mhm,
was that you went through.
mhm,
So to me, there's like a divide. There's what is the parent responsible for? And I would say just imagine that's getting them through high school. That could be preparing them for college, or if they don't want to pursue college, it could be preparing them for whatever else they need to do in life. So they need to be able to read, they need to be able to communicate, they need to be able to do basic math. There's certain things that we need to be able to do. So I, I that's where I would split it. The university piece, I think, any advanced training after you leave the house, that's a discussion about what is it you're trying to do. And again, to me, it's if you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be an accountant, you're going to be something that requires a specific skill. That makes a lot of sense. I don't think that's the world we live in today with most universities. So
yeah, I wanna add to that and bring it back to a younger level. I th For me anyway, when we were starting our homeschooling journey, I actually wrote out a list of skill sets that I wanted our kids to have acquired before they graduated high school. And they weren't anything like they have to have achieved calculus level math or that they have to be able to write 25-page research paper. It was none of that. It was, are they resilient in the face of struggles? Do they have discipline to do things that are tough and maybe not very easy, not very desirable? Are they able to think outside the box? Are they able to find solutions to problems that they might have? Are they able to self-educate? I mean, that was a really big thing is can they, if they need to find out the solution to something, figure it out themselves, because past the school age, you're on your own mostly. Nobody's going to be holding your hand and saying, here are the 10 steps for you to achieve this desirable outcome, right? You have to figure out the steps yourself. So their ability to interact with people successfully, their ability to have healthy relationships, their sense of self-worth needs to be really strong. Their ability to face changes in life is should be really solid, right? Because the only constant in life is change. And if you can't handle change, then you will have a lot of issues in life. Are you able to do you have a work ethic those kinds of, non-academic things were what I put down on their necessary skill set that I wanted them to graduate with, not the math and specific levels, or they have to have taken physics and things like that. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Those are both really, really good answers. And what I got, just kind of in summary from you guys is that the the education or an educated person isn't really, it's not possible to measure like we believe it to be. So I mean, yeah, you get you know the grades and the paper and that sort of thing, but the things that you were just listing, Tali, are
Mhm,
very abstract. Those are skills that not every single person has the same definition or the same approaches those skill sets in the exact same way. They think,
mhm,
they problem solve differently, they communicate differently. I mean, every single person exemplifies those skill sets in a very different way. And
mhm,
so when the public education system claims to educate our children, what from what I see is that they're not really educating them as much as they're basically um, they're sort of teaching them what authority is, and then teaching them
mhm,
all how to follow a certain set of rules and a certain number of steps to arrive at a specific solution when you are given the specific parameters of any problem. But again, what you're talking about, from your definition of education, it's much, much more abstract.
Yeah, I
Yeah, and
agree.
I think it's also important that it's not career specific. It should be life specific. It should be, how do you get the most out of life for your own happiness and for other people that you can impact?
Yeah, I would add, I mean, just look at the history of our education system. It really is geared towards turning out a population of people who are compliant. They're going
Mhm,
to go get a job, wherever it is, in industry or wherever it is, and they want people to kind of follow whatever the leadership says to do. It's not meant to create free thinkers.
no,
So
and actually, that TED Talk that I mentioned to you before by Ken Robinson, the one that is titled "How Schools Kill Creativity," he actually talked about how our current public school system was created during the Industrial Revolution for the purpose of churning out factory workers, and they have kept that same system today. They just keep pumping more money into a failing system because our society is no longer, industrial based.
I think it's almost been co-opted by. I don't know, Caleb, if you are okay with the politics or not on your podcast, but to me, it's become a chance for indoctrination. It's almost been taken over. It's no longer just about people being compliant. It's also the thought police. This is the way you have to think, and if you don't think this way, then so not only is it destroying creativity, but it's I don't know. It seems very, very oppressive to me in terms of if you don't think the right way, then you're going to be ostracized in some way. You'll need additional instruction, or there'll be some other thing there, and there's other political agendas now. So now the kids become pawns in a political game, and um, we keep getting worse.
Well, also, I want to add to that as well. I feel like over the last few decades, parents have been told through various media output, or, whatever propaganda that was put out, that they should sort of yield their children to the experts
Mm.
because they don't know what they're doing, and the experts know because they have scientific research to back them up, and parents need to step back and let the experts, do their thing with their children. And over the years, they just keep taking more and more power away from the parents. And then the parents sort of get used to the idea, and then they give up the power before it's even required of them. So, one of the things that I hear a ton through my 20 years of homeschooling from people who hear that I'm a homeschooler, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, "Oh, I could never do that." And I would ask them why. And they would say, "Oh, because I don't have the patience, I don't have the know-how, I don't know what to do." And that's just not true. I mean, parents have the best intuition for what will work for their kids because they are intimately, interacting with their kids. They know how the kids what makes them tick, what turns them off, and so they can be the most effective teacher. But throughout the last few decades, I feel like we either have willingly given up that power or we have been convinced that we should give up that power.
I think it's intentional. I think you could tie this back to some of the discussions we've had previously, where this is where you have to take self custody of the education. So if you look at the way communism, socialism works, they don't want a church, they don't want parents, they don't want anyone but the state to, or the party, or whatever it is, the central control entity is. They're the ones that have a say. And if you have a good family unit, if you have any other influence, it's harder to do that. So if you destroy that, if you take that away and take over the education, then you are better able to maintain control. So to me, it doesn't seem like it's a coincidence that as we have greater monetary problems and we go more and more towards a central control type of discussion, like the CDBCs and things like that, that we might get into, that education is one of the areas that is fought over, because that's if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to maintain control. If you do have that, then the opposite is true. You can have it. So to me, it's about freedom. If you really value freedom and the whole self-sovereign type of ethos that comes up in the Bitcoin circles, then you really want to have control over the education of your kids. It's to me, they go together. And if you don't, then you're trusting another entity with education. Just like in Bitcoin, the central the Keynesian way would be to trust some other third party. So why are we trusting third parties with our kids' education? So I'd say take it back. That's the self custody. That's to me the link that gets back to the self custody idea.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's so important, so powerful. And to place the power back within the kids and leveraging their natural passion and curiosity for life to help them learn and explore. And you had said something, Tali, about the kids the best as their parent. You know how they're going to learn. You know their natural inclinations. And then to me, on top of it, because you are their parent, you have this um, undying and natural, unconditional love for your kids that allows you this added level of patience and understanding when it comes to teaching your kids. Now I'm sure that not every day is rainbows and unicorns. I'm sure that there is absolutely
Right.
some tough, but that's also
Yeah.
what being a parent is about. Being a parent
Right.
is just as much about learning from your children as much as your children learning from you. So
Yeah, and for sure. And also because you can't make one decision in isolation having to do with schooling. So let's say you have a bad day with your son, you're trying to teach him the numbers and he just was messing around, wasn't paying attention, things like that. You don't get to walk away and go, "Okay, the 2 hours are up and we are done." You're still having to deal with him, so it's critical, right, that you and him have a good and trusting relationship for the long term, and that is probably the best motivator, right? Because you're kinda stuck with him, you don't get to walk away from him and go, "Ah, somebody else's problem now." And I unfortunately, I do know some people who have that mentality. They clock in, they do what they feel they need to do, and then they're like, "Okay, and then it's not my problem."
Right. And just just to be careful too, there might be a subject that comes up where you are not the right person to teach. You can't get through.
Mhm.
And you're still sort of the orchestra leader. You can say, okay, I can teach up to a certain point, but when I get into organic chemistry, I'm going to get a tutor.
Right.
or I don't know how to do piano, so I'm going to get piano lessons. Or if it's a subject that you're struggling with, you have responsibility for making sure that they work through it, but you're not on an island. There are amazing resources
Right.
that are available today,
Hmm.
and you just need to be the one to help. You're like the one to help get the right type of coaching at the right time. So I agree with everything up to that, but I just want to say if someone
Yeah.
hasn't homeschooled before,
Yeah.
that actually may come across as more intimidating or more daunting, and it's not true. What to me, what we're saying is you take responsibility for it because it's your kid, so you care more than a stranger is going to care about your kid. So you're going to push through, and all I'm saying is just it's okay if you don't know everything. In fact, no
Hmm.
one knows anything. So
Hmm.
this should not be something you should be scared about. It just means you need to be creative. If you're not the best
Right.
at public speaking, then you get them involved with Gavel Club. If you're not the best at piano, you get them to a piano expert. Whatever, fill in the blank. Latin, chemistry, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So I just wanted to add that because I don't want someone who listens to
Hmm.
this who hasn't done homeschooling yet or in the early stages to think that we're asking them to go off and get doctorate degrees in
Yeah. No,
10 different
definitely not.
subjects.
Yeah.
You're just taking responsibility for the program of education,
Hmm.
and you have a ton of resources there to available to help. So sorry for the tangent,
No,
but
I,
yeah.
I actually I really agree with that analogy of the orchestra conductor. So for sure, raising a child takes a village. I mean, that is absolutely true. You can't do it by yourself. Even if you're the most dedicated parent and you don't sleep at all ever, you still can't do it by yourself. You need a village, but you get to choose the village that you form around your child, and that is the most empowering thing. And
Right.
you can
Yeah.
pick and choose what is the best combination for your child as well.
Yeah. Exactly. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, so you're saying that you don't necessarily need some sort of special license in order to be the person that is in charge of your children's learning.
No, just your
No.
love for your child and your desire to make the best of things and to create the best opportunities for your child to experience.
So I'm curious, what was it like for you guys when you made that initial decision or the final decision where you're like, you know what, we're gonna do this. We're pulling the kids out of school or we're not gonna send them to school. And then you're telling all of your friends and family that you're gonna homeschool the kids. Was that tough?
We kind of fell into it actually. When I didn't even know homeschooling was a thing until our oldest was 1 year old and we were at church and someone was telling me that she had pulled her daughters out of school because they were special needs and they weren't getting the care they require. So she homeschooled them. And I asked her, my first reaction was, "Do you have a teaching degree?" And she goes, "Yeah, I do have a teaching degree." I'm like, "Oh, so you need a teaching degree to be a homeschooler." Okay. So then that was when our oldest was 1. And then when she was 2, we were at a play date and our friend's neighbor came over with her son and was telling me about homeschooling. And she handed me a book called How to Teach Your Baby to Read and was describing to me how she had taught her 10-year-old son how to read with these giant flashcards. And I actually our oldest was 3. I came home and I read that book overnight and I was freaked out. I was waking up Scott. I was like poking him with my elbow and I said, "Oh my gosh, we're running out of time. Brianna's almost 3." Because the
She can't
time
read
frame
yet. Yeah.
she wasn't reading it, but the time frame in that book, How to Teach Your Baby to Read, was from 0, like day 1 of birth, to 36 months old, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Brianna's almost 36 months old." So I that was when I started actually looking at homeschooling because I thought I was late to the game. And then, that same friend gave me another book, which I read from cover to cover, and that was when I started thinking, "Oh, maybe I can do this," because you don't need a teaching degree. Even if you start, with your kids when they're in preschool, kindergarten, you know enough to teach them the ABCs, you know enough to teach them 1 plus 1 equals 2. So that was when we started. And we didn't have to explain any of that to our families in the beginning because the kids were young. When they got old enough, the second most popular question a homeschooler gets is, what about socialization? Your child is going to be socially awkward. They're gonna be like a hermit. They're not gonna be able to talk to people, which is the biggest lie I think that is circulating around, whether intentionally or unintentionally, because homeschooled kids are one of the most socially adapt people that you can meet. So anyway, in the beginning, when we mentioned it to our families on both sides, Scott's side and my side, they were very, very upset at us. They were exceptionally uh, reluctant to speak against the public school system. And at the time, I didn't have anything against that. I just wanted to start teaching our kids how to read. As I shared on the podcast that you listened to before, some preschools, they hold back teaching kids how to read because they don't want their kids to get bored in kindergarten. And I think that's one of the worst reasons to not teach a child who's willing and ready to learn how to read, just so they could be kept in a herd. Like, like almost like a
Mhm. Sure.
conveyor belt system. Don't get off the conveyor belt because everybody's gotta go through the factory at the same rate kind of thing.
Right. You're back to conformity. Yeah.
Right. So it was really like emotionally challenging because when the kids are young, you need the most support physically, right? Because you're more tired. The kids are running all over the place and physically you're more tired. But it was difficult because when I was tired from just parenting and then had to do schooling, I felt like I couldn't ask people for help because I made that decision myself without their consent. So that was probably the most difficult part. What do you think, Scott?
Socialization comes up all the time, and I
Mm.
agree. It's complete FUD. It is it's not accurate, and based on what, not that I don't, I mean, we went through it. I guess you could say that makes us an expert. I feel like that's a little strong, but based on my observations, the homeschooling kids actually are the most adept at being able to have conversations with people at different levels. And and some of the public school, I don't want to say, hey, if your kid's public school, you're a bad person or something. I'm just making a general statement that some of the homeschooling kids are actually the most adept at being able to communicate at different levels. And it's just this whole idea of the socialization it's just FUD. It's just FUD. It's not true at all. And if anything, sometimes you worry that their confidence gets up, they're going to be too social. So I think you may start out with that, but then you're gonna come back to being to normal parent concerns about your kids pretty quickly. I don't think socialization is an issue whatsoever. In terms of other things, in terms of communication, I think I guess I'll be a little careful, but there's almost this thing where, as if we had somehow said to our parents that you didn't raise us correctly. We went through public school, wasn't that good enough? Why is that not good enough? And for me personally, that's where I struggled. It was, hey, this is just our decision about what we're going to do for the kids. It has nothing to do with the past. It's not saying that anything else is bad. It's just a personal decision. And so other people have different ideas they're going to attach to it, and it's not their decision. It's your decision as the parent. What are you going to do? It's not the state's decision. It's not relatives. It's not friends. It's what do you want to do to raise your kids? And other people have different expectations, and so you'll get these kind of questions or comments, and you find yourself on the defense. And I would just say, just be confident. You've got this. And kids are also so resilient. The worst that happens is you have to switch to a different program if something doesn't work. It's I mean, limited downside and just asymmetrical upside on what they can learn. So just be confident in that. You're you're
I
good.
Yeah, I also want to add that, so in hindsight, right? We did it for 20 years. I just want to say that Scott's parents are now fully supportive. they
Yeah.
they actually came out and
Yeah.
told us a couple of years back, we are so glad you chose to homeschool. But at the time, it was hard to see that it was a good decision because homeschooling was still relatively new, and there were very few people they can reference who went through that journey and came out like normal people. Like they were so worried that our kids were not going to be normal people. But you just got to keep a long-term perspective and know that this is not going to be an overnight kind of process. It's going to take a decade, decade and a half, 2 decades, to complete. And lots of things can change. And like Scott said, pivot if something's not working. You are never, ever stuck in a decision. You always have the freedom to pivot
And ask for help. Yeah.
and ask for help.
Yeah. I mean, you don't back down when someone says, "Why do you like Bitcoin?"
Mm.
Right?
No.
It's so why should you back down with saying, "I want what's best for my kid"? Like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the right attitude, I would say. But there's when you're in the moment, and depending on your relationship with whoever's asking you that, it can feel, well, at least I felt like I didn't anticipate the question coming, so I probably didn't answer it very well whenever they asked that. Um, but proof of work, now
Yeah,
here we are
definitely
late.
proof of work.
Now
Yeah.
we've invested the time.
Yeah.
We've made this journey, gone through a lot of ups and downs along on the way. But I would say that it was worth it, and we would do it again. So
And I don't want to seem like I'm bragging, but I'm going to just say some stuff about our kids. But I just all along, the last many years, we've gotten a ton of feedback from people that were unsolicited, but they come up to me, whether it's at the library or we've been at a restaurant or they've taken some type of workshops somewhere with like sort of the general public or whatever, just all across the board, they come up to me and say, "We are so impressed by your kids because they are respectful. They are
a good work ethic.
good
Yeah.
good work ethic. They're so pleasant to work with, and et cetera, et cetera." But anyway, so I don't want to say too much about that, but I'm just saying it makes a difference. It shows that when you pour into your children with your heart and soul and every minute of your life, it does show. It does show. Even if you don't do it perfectly, because we're by far not anywhere near perfection. Obviously, nobody can possibly be perfect in homeschooling or parenting. That's just not even an idea that anybody should discuss. But your efforts will turn a result. And it just will, because your sacrifice, your kids know it, and people will notice, and you will know down the road, because your son is still young, but going down this path, you will start to get these unsolicited responses because there are so many kids out there who don't get their parents' attention, which is really, really sad.
Well, they
Anyway,
don't
a
get that.
tangent, a
They
tangent.
don't get the guidance. I still think so. Kate, we haven't talked about this, but I mean, there's learning moments all the time. It could
Mm.
be in the middle of the day, and
Mhm.
you're taking a break, and you're saying you haven't brought up the trash cans yet, or whatever it is that the chore might be, and you might find yourself in a 15-minute, 30-minute discussion about personal responsibility. And so that's not a lesson plan. That's not something that you take out a book for, but it's something that all along the way, all those little conversations that you're having, it is part of the education. They're learning. You're changing their framework on how they view the world, and then the result will be years later, they they can see things and understand things. We don't want to get too detailed in some of their experiences, but our kids have been exposed to others now that they're done with high school, and their observations on the world. They're like, some of the things they shared, that their their peers, how they think and what they do. It was a little scary. I felt great that they were willing to share it with us, but I felt like we had prepared them so that when they were no longer underneath our roof, that they could try to make a determination of what was right and wrong on their own. We had trained them how to think, and I think that's an amazing thing in terms of education. If you can help someone learn how to think, learn how to learn, learn how to deal with situations. That's a life skill, and that'll pay off long term.
Yeah, favorite quote that I just came across recently is by Aristotle, and he said, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." And
Yeah.
man,
Yeah, for sure.
that's what you guys are talking about. That's what you guys are talking
Mhm.
about. You're talking about being able to think critically. And Scott, you were talking about how public schools, they tend to indoctrinate and they teach kids to work in more of a factory setting and to essentially accept what they are told by the authority as truth. And and I think that the nature of the way that you guys are educating, the nature of homeschooling as a whole, which the outcome being critical thought, um, is it doesn't matter what you think. They're not gonna the established system is not going to like that because it it's like its entire purpose is to drive the critical thought out of you. It's like education is you think this. Education is
Right.
not I don't think this specific thing.
Mhm.
I not only do I not think this specific thing that you told me, but I just question it and I question everything. And my models for the world continually evolve as I learn and absorb more and more information.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
So I think the next sort of topic that I wanted to get onto because we went through the socialization aspect. That's a super big fear for people, and obviously proof of work. In fact, I talked to one of your kids on Friday, Nolan, and he was super pleasant, just like I was talking to any other person. I mean, it wasn't like there was
Yeah.
any, that
Right, that's why I
stigma.
want to make sure you got to talk to him, so it's not just us telling you that he's a normal person.
Yeah.
Right?
You can
Yeah.
experience it yourself.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just so silly, right? Because any time that a homeschooling student is portrayed in media and in movies and stuff, it's just they're super weird and
Yes,
people just like it just doesn't make any
yes.
sense.
But that's
So,
okay though. Like, I mean, you have weird people in high school, in public high schools too.
right.
And so
Yeah.
it's not like because you're homeschooled, if someone happens to be whatever weird or unique or whatever quirkiness kind of term you want to use,
Mhm.
you're going to have that. You're going to have some that are awkward, but I would argue like that's just human nature. No matter what you do, there's going to be some people who are they're just that's kind of the way they are. And so I agree with you. I think like Hollywood and others in terms of what the I don't know, I guess the narrative is that yeah, you're gonna be awkward. You're not gonna be awkward. You're only fill in the blank, whatever that is. And it's not true. It is they're just kids. They're the same as all the other kids.
Mhm.
And they're just literally like all the other kids. So
Mhm.
anyway, sorry for
Yeah, and
interrupting you.
no, not at all. I appreciate the input. So, yeah, so the socialization is a big piece of FUD. And I think the second one is, well, these kids, because they do not have formal education, that they're not going to be able to succeed in life. Whatever I think, and that's probably by the terms of the widely accepted definition of success. You have a good job, you have a lot of money, this sort of thing. So, and they're actually, so for me, my, I do actually have a legitimate, you know, qualm, which is, the system by which we learn is basically trained or help designed to train us to be like a factory worker or somebody who basically just sits in a cubicle and just takes orders from a boss every single day. And and that seems like it's largely well, it has to be because most people are educated through the system. It seems like our economy is based on workers like this, right? At
Mhm.
this point in time, I think that if you are not of an entrepreneurial mindset, is there isn't there a concern that it might be difficult for a homeschooled student who doesn't, I don't know, who's not like of this just follow the steps mindset to get this, a traditional job?
Well, I'll just tell you that out of my kids' other homeschooling friends, they have two boys that were accepted to the United States Air Force Academy. Several of them are engineers. We've heard people who made it to MIT, um, the big name schools. And during the college application process, we into interviewed with many, many universities, and I always ask them outright, "Do you have other homeschoolers on your campus? How do you see homeschoolers?" And across the board, they tell us, "We absolutely have homeschoolers on our campus, and we view homeschooled kids very highly because they are mostly very, very well educated." And while I hate standardized testing, unfortunately, that's what we had to do to prove, their academic level. And our kids did really well. Some their friends did amazing. They're no different from any other publicly educated people at all. So whether they go into entrepreneurship or they want to follow the traditional route of going into engineering or going to medical school, anything like that, the road has been paved by homeschoolers over the last 2 decades, I think.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting. I should go try to find out what the stats are on, but it is a growing, it
Mm-hmm.
is definitely a growing movement.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that's really cool. I think so. Last night we had dinner with my wife's family, and we kind of got on the subject of generations. And my wife's grandpa was kind of complaining. He was maybe not complaining, but he was just like pointing out how the Gen Zs and the millennials are this super unproductive group of people. And he blamed technology. I think he blamed, you know, it's I don't know, the nature. He didn't really get into it. He just kind of blamed technology as a whole. And I think where he was sort of blaming it is this like immediate satisfaction nature, the nature of social media sort of tricking us into feeling like we are owed something. There's all these sort of negative connotations around, technology and having the phone. And while I believe that that there's definitely some etiquette, some things that we need to learn about technology and how to leverage it as a tool instead of falling prey to that tool. I don't believe that the technology itself is the detrimental factor. I think that the detrimental factor is the school. I think that what happens is in traditional education is that you go to school and they just beat innovation out of you. They beat fulfillment out of you to the point where you're just like, is this really what is this really what it's all about? Is this so
Mhm.
I just imagine that when homeschool kids get out into the real world and they seek out some of these more traditional jobs, and that they're like, this is why am I doing this? This is not at all what I thought the real world would be like, because here I am kind of boxed in and not able to
Mhm.
innovate. But what was kind of cool, what I noticed you guys were mentioning, is the career paths that you had mentioned. Was These are, first of all, schools like MIT and, um, professions like being a doctor or being an engineer. I think that they're slightly different from some of the traditional careers in that they still have a lot of room for critical thought. So those places in our society are still they're still there, even though that I think a lot of the workforce has moved from the factory to doing sort of menial tasks, in the office. But it sounds to me like, the homeschoolers are more inclined to find the jobs that they can actually innovate in and problem solve.
Yeah, I would make a prediction, at least my own thought about what's coming up in the future. I'm greatly influenced by the book The Price of Tomorrow, where Jeff Booth makes the argument that technology is deflationary, and um, it should be making education come down in terms of the cost, and should be increasing the quality. And if you look at that, some of the things that are available today compared to when we started homeschooling, I think that's really true. It's just the it's just amazing. Like Sailor.org, you can take free college level courses free. I mean, it's amazing what you can do. And then as far as in the workplace, though, I think that's gonna continue to happen. So now that people can work after COVID, especially, but now you can work remotely more easily. So if India or China or someplace in, it can be South America, wherever it is, you don't have to have a Silicon Valley where you have this hub of talent anymore. The technology is going to allow people to work more and more than they already were able to work in remote places. You throw artificial intelligence on there, and I think what's going to happen is the result of the poor quality of our education. The more money, it's sort of like Department of Energy and everything else. The more money we put into it, the worse the results are, or our food. We can talk about the food as well, but we're making a whole generation that is so focused on the TikToks and the other things, that the immediate gratification, the kind of high tie preference type of thing. Meanwhile, other countries are investing their education systems. They're developing their next generation. And so I think, one, technology can be used in amazingly strong, beneficial ways. I think right now what we're seeing, though, is the result of our education system and where it is. We're going to continue to produce a generation and future generations that are not really great workers. They're not going to be what we've kind of grown to expect. And then the rude awakening is going to be that as technology continues to increase, there's going to be less and less ability to just get by where you are physically. And more things can be automated. AI can do more and more things. If anything, I mean, we should be really scared that our education system is where it's at, because technology is going to keep on getting more and more efficient. It's going to have higher quality output. It's just going to continue to compound. So I guess there's two edges to that. One is it can be used for amazing good, but right now it's gonna cause some short term gain, because we don't have actually prepared for the type of work that's going to be coming up in the next 10 or 20 years.
You had mentioned something about your wife's grandfather saying today's young people are sort of addicted to technology and things like that. And I just remembered this book that I read years and years ago called Raising Boys. And I don't remember the author's name, but I do remember what she said in the first chapter. The example she gave was the kids are on a playground and the boys get into a disagreement and they get into a tussle and somebody threw a punch or something like that. But then the boys figured it out and they shook hands and they were fine, right? But there's no tolerance for that now. I feel like more and more we take power away from our children. We tell them in various ways that we don't trust that they can resolve their own problems, issues, challenges, whatever you want to call it, including their interpersonal relationships. And so the new trend that I've observed over the last few years is the technical devices become the babysitter because nobody wants their kids to get into conflict. And so the easiest thing, and plus we're afraid to let them out in our yard, right? Because that's dangerous. And so we kind of lock them in the house and go watch a show, go get on your computer or whatever. So I think there is one aspect of technology just being something that the kids turn to because they just feel almost powerless to do things on their own. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm explaining it right.
Oh yeah,
I
no,
I
it
just
makes
feel like
total
it's
sense.
it's like the same trend. It's like society takes power away from the parents because, oh, they don't have the acronyms that follow their names that says, they have some certain degree to justify them having an opinion on anything. And we take this the same thing. We take the power away from our kids. You can't resolve your own issues with your peers. Bring it to your parents, bring it to your teacher, bring it to your principal. Somebody else will resolve it for you. They grow up, they go into society, and all of a sudden they're supposed to be an adult. That's there's no bridge, I
I'm kind of
feel.
mixed feelings on that because I think mixed the social media you can have bullying online and things like that where it's certainly not like a, a teacher somewhere saying that this is what we condone. So technology has different it can be used in different ways and and some of those are really good and in some
Yeah.
cases they're
Yeah, it works
the
both ways. Yeah, but hurt people hurt people. And so I think it comes down to the child or the person feeling one way or another, right? Whether they are validated or they're important or they trust themselves, they have sense of self-worth. It's all connected,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I actually one of the things I think that we'll look back on in the COVID period is that the the damage of just saying, well, you can just take a video because you have technology and you can do videos from home, that you've actually it's kind of like the flip side. You've lost the socialization. So if we were talking about that where homeschooling is good for socialization, the ability to just lock down and tell people to stay at home because you have the technology, it can actually hurt things in the other systems.
Mm,
There's a lot of aspects to it. Technology is one that's it's a difficult. It's there's just so many different aspects to it.
mhm.
But Caleb, I mean, for me, that book that I don't know. Have you read that book, The Price of Tomorrow?
I have not. It's on my list though.
So it the it's technology is deflationary in a good way is one thing. You have a different force, and that is our monetary system is inflationary, and and we're at a crossroads. There's going to be a lot of conflict because these are diametrically opposed forces, and so it's not a book about Bitcoin per se, although Jeff Booth supports Bitcoin, but he does an excellent job of putting a framework around this technology subject, and it's a pretty short read. It's not technical at all, but highly effective in laying out a framework, first principles basis framework of looking at technology. So I would recommend people pick that up and take what you want out of it because I think in this discussion there's so many different tangents and rabbit holes we could go down. It's a little difficult to stay on track.
Yeah, yeah, no, it is. Bitcoin has a tendency to do that because when you're talking about changing one of the fundamental building blocks of the way that we exchange value and interact on a daily basis, not to mention how we all glorify our careers as being part of our identity. I mean, one of the first things that when you meet someone for the first time that you discuss is, well, what do you do for a living? I mean, that's
Right.
how that important it is to people, right? Is
Right.
because you ask them immediately. And a lot of times there is judgment, good or bad, whatever, but there's always some sort of judgment as to what that career is and how smart or capable that person is based on what they do for a living. Um,
Right.
and what's cool, because I agree with you, I think that technology is a deflationary force as well, and there's a lot of negativity about that aspect, and there always has been. Like there were people lobbying against cars because the stable boys would lose jobs and this sort of thing, and but I think in reality, technology takes away jobs that people don't actually want to do anyway. And what's really cool now about a lot of this sort of artificial intelligence type of technology that's coming out, like the stuff that supposedly Elon Musk is working on developing is, basically these humanoid robots that are able to do factory work. So,
Mhm.
and then, you also have artificial intelligence that's self-learning and can learn, how to program itself and do menial tasks. And so what's really going to be left at the end of the day for people to do are creative tasks. And this is where
Right, exactly.
spirituality, yeah, well, I mean, this is where spirituality comes in. It's your highest self, it came here to create. It didn't come here to You didn't come here to follow rules and just bend the knee to authority. No, you came here to create, to express love and interact and enjoy life with other people. And school and the methodology that it teaches is not it doesn't mirror that to me. So that's why this is so strongly, for me, this is why a different form of education is so strongly connected to higher consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
If I could throw one last thing at you, Caleb, on that,
Of
it
course.
it also creates something that we did not have to deal with, but future homeschoolers will, and that is when you have things like Chat GPT or whatever it's called, you
Yeah.
you just have another the technology is going to bring up things that you're not even aware about today that could get a young person in trouble because either because they don't learn themselves or whatever it is, they cheating or other things. There's so many things you just don't know. Um, so it just the thought came to me as you were speaking. We didn't have to deal with that 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
20 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
imagine what AI is going to be able to do,
Mm-hmm.
and education is going to have to continue to adapt, and it cannot be a sort of a one size fits all for eternity. Education needs to education needs to catch up with the current world, and the current world includes technology. So there's going to be new challenges we just don't even know about yet. But Chat GPT came up to me as you were talking about AI there for a second.
Right.
We got some new things that we're going to have to be pretty nimble with, and we're going to have to figure out. So
I think the whole definition of education as we started this program is going to have to be re-examined frequently over the next, several years, even as homeschoolers, because we can adapt a whole lot faster than the public school system or even the private school system.
100%,
Yeah,
100%.
they have to go through whatever evaluation process, and then God knows how long it would take before it's implemented. Whereas we can hear something interesting, explore it, try it with our kids, and immediately take steps, right? But even then, we have to be so diligent and just keep right on top of the trend. I think within the homeschooling community, you sort of have two groups of people. You have people who are just really really bent on doing things the classic way because they respect tradition and they think that's the best way to go. But then you have and then they don't let their kids have a phone, they don't let their kids go on computers, nothing, no screen time, nothing. I don't really agree with that because our society today is just different. It requires the kids to make changes very, very quickly. And to keep them away from the fact of life, which is technology exists in our world, is not beneficial. So then there's the other side of the homeschooling community where they literally do everything sort of the same way that the public schools do, but they just do it at home. So again, that's going to be slow moving, somewhere in the middle,
They're going to
finding that
lag.
fine line.
Yeah, it's going to
Mhm.
lag.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm really glad we're talking about this. I didn't think about this, but this is a pretty important point. If we're I mean, just think about it. Our education system also not only you have the factory conformity type of model you talked about, it also was conforming to an agricultural season where you had the summers off.
Oh
If
yeah.
if we're if we're that slow to react to things like that, how in the world is our education system with more and more central planners going to be able to keep up with these increases in technology? And so to me, if the world's going to be more competitive, I want my kids to have the best chance for success. And that means if you're able to adapt quickly to whatever these technologies are, you're going to better be able to prepare them. Whereas people who are stuck in a system that is slow to change and lagging, they're it they're always going to be lagging, and they're just going to continue to be lagging with those. Whereas if you
Yeah.
homeschool, you have a chance. You're like, wow, that's a new thing. No idea where that came from. But then you have a chance of saying, well, we're going to pivot here based on
Yeah.
what we've learned,
Hmm.
as opposed to, nope, that's what we're doing for this year or the multiple years, whatever the programs are that
Yeah.
take forever to change.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you two examples. The first one is so our son actually decided that he was going to drop out of college, the one that you spoke to. And when he was making that decision, he was really surprised that I gave him that option. And he said, "I thought, all of our schooling was about getting into a good college. Why did you change your mind?" This is after he had gone to college for 1 year. And I said, "The thing is that I thought it was the right thing to do because I had some assumption about the value of college, right? So we worked for it. He got there, he he's looked around, he experienced it, and we both realized very, very quickly that higher education was no longer what I thought it was. And I said, "Nolan, if we don't pivot with additional information, then we're being really stupid. We have new information. This is not what we thought it was. We're not gonna throw the next 4 years into, the pot just because that's what we worked for.
with
We pivot
with a hell of a lot of money too.
with a lot of money." Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That's such a fantastic example of what homeschooling has done for not just your children, but also for you, because you spent all of this time learning through and teaching critical thought, and you got to the point where you move into formal education with Nolan, and Nolan's you say you see what is coming from his education, and you say, okay, this isn't what we deem education. This isn't why we follow these programs, and this isn't why we learn. And I think homeschooling in and of itself gave you the ability to step back and be like, is this really worth it? And I think that it
Mhm.
has a lot to do with fear, because much of the education system that we have today is based around fear. It's based around, if you're not at the top of your class, oh, I'm scared, I might not make a good living. If you know I'm if I'm not socially accepted at school, then I might not be socially accepted in the real world. And there's just, everything is based upon fear, and you guys were able to overcome these fears of being like, you know what, I'm just gonna, maybe that risk is there. You had a question, or whether or not how much that risk was there, but
Mhm.
I'm willing to take that risk if that fear is really justified or not. And because you overcame that fear, you faced that and sort of let it just be, you were able to show that there's nothing to be afraid of. And so,
Exactly.
yeah.
You're never stuck in one decision forever, right? So the other example I wanted to share with you, I was visiting colleges with our youngest, and he was interested in computer science. He's our coder. And we visited this one school, and we were speaking to the director of the computer science department. And I said, "Do you guys teach your students about blockchain technology?" He said, "Oh, well, we mention it, but it's not that important, so no." And I said, "Not that important? Blockchain technology is changing the world." And he was like, "Well, no, we'll talk about it, but that's it." So the cool thing is, because we homeschool, we were able to just take our youngest kid to Bitcoin Park and just expose him directly to, the blockchain technology that this professor, the head of the department, felt wasn't very important. We have that freedom. We don't have to rely on some formal structure or system to teach our kids at all. We have that freedom. We can take charge and do what we believe is right. So,
Freedom is very critical word in this in this example, because it's really the basis for all of the strength that your children are coming out of homeschooling with, including the social abilities. We talked a lot about they're why they are just as socially capable as a publicly schooled student, possibly even more so depending on the criteria you use. And it's
Mhm.
because you have the freedom. It's because you have the ability to, they have the flexibility. I think you had mentioned on Friday, you were talking about how so much time is just spent even traveling to school, to and from
Yes.
school. And you already have, so you have a leg up on that. And then,
Yeah.
they have the flexibility to run errands with you throughout the day. And
Mhm.
because you outsource specific classes and things like this. They're going out and about every single day, and and meeting
Yeah,
with
we
meeting
joke
with people.
we joke that most homeschoolers don't school at home. Most homeschoolers school in the van
Yeah,
because they
right.
are so active. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to kind of touch on here today was in the Citadel Dispatch episode that you guys were on. I couldn't help but get sort of like an overwhelming feeling like this would be a lot of work. This sounds like I'm going to be super busy all the time, and my kids are going to hate me. And, this sounds just really, really hard, really, really hard for me to do. And I
Yeah.
just wanted to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely want to share a story about this one. So I was on one of the spectrum. I was a busy bee. I was running the kids all over the place. As Nolan mentioned to you, I put them in 16 different competitive sports because I wanted them to know what they're choosing from. So we did everything under the sun. Compared to another friend of ours, she was very methodical, very unhurried, never rushed her kids from one thing to another, always only did one thing at a time. And I have the benefit of seeing the outcome of our two families because our kids are about the same age. And you know what? They come out about the same. So you
Mm.
definitely can take it any tempo you want that works for your family, for sure. So if you feel overwhelmed, outsource. If you feel overwhelmed, ask for help. If you feel overwhelmed, get support. You don't have to do it yourself. And you get into a community because there are lots of homeschooling communities out there. So everybody's willing to share their experiences. They're more than happy to help you. So yeah, don't let us overwhelm you. We're kind of
Yeah.
on the crazy side a
Don't.
little bit.
Yeah. You can, and you. It's okay to make mistakes. Like you gotta forgive yourself. Realize that the kids are really resilient.
They are.
So you just you already have what you need. Don't let, in other words, don't let perfection of whatever came across where you have some type of, uh, I don't know, a curriculum that you think you have to keep to, or something else in there, like whatever that perfection is, that that's something you need to let go of. You
Mhm,
just take baby steps with it. Figure
mhm,
out what's the next thing you want to teach and try it. you have you literally have a lot of time. You have their whole childhood to go. If you don't get something exactly right, you'll probably both learn something from it.
mhm,
But just don't let the idea of a perfect homeschooler. So in other words, if you have in your head that, oh my God, if I don't get this curriculum right, if I don't do all these things, if I don't go all these activities, my kid's gonna be ruined and their whole life is done. Like if you go into this with that kind of perspective, you're gonna feel an amazing amount of stress,
mhm,
and that's not going to help you or your kids. A much healthier approach is just kind of look at where you've come and how much more they're doing just day by day. Just don't try to be perfect. There is no perfect homeschooler out there, just like there's no perfect anything else,
mhm.
and that perfection becomes the enemy of something that's really good.
Yeah,
And
and
so
you really have more time than you think. You really do. I think that's one thing that I should have told myself over and over again over the last 20 years is that I have more time than I think because I was always rushing around. And I really admire my friend who never hurried. She knew that she had more time than she
So
thought. But I also want to share with you there's a program out there. It's kind of old. I don't know if it's still around, but it was called the Robinson Family Method, and it was a single dad who was homeschooling his 6 or 7 children. His wife had passed away, and he was an MIT professor, and he had a farm that he was running. So, with his 3 kids, he only formally educated them 3 hours out of the day. He did math for 2 hours, and then the rest of the time, the kids were helping around the farm, and that's where they got science and biology, physics, things like that. And they were encouraged to read classical literature, and that was, and then they took like music lessons, they went to church, things like that. So that was the extent of his homeschooling, like formal homeschooling effort: 3 hours a day, 2 hours of math, right, and then just reading great literature. His kids got into Ivy League schools.
well, I
So
mean, there's also, I mean, look at it. If you're homeschooling, there's a lot of dead time in public schools
mhm, mhm,
where it's not like during their 8 or 10 hours away from you that they're just doing 100%.
no,
So you don't need to have 8 or 10 hours of condensed material. And then I've heard this too. So for example, when you're homeschooling, you can teach year round. The kids don't know any different.
mhm,
And one of the problems with taking summers off is that you spend the first part of the next year reviewing the things from the prior year, especially for math.
mhm,
But if you, it's sort of like getting in shape. It's a lot easier to stay in shape than it is to get in shape. So imagine you've gotten out of shape and you got to get in shape, and every year you're restarting over and over again. Whereas a homeschooler, they can they just do maybe a smaller amount of time each day. But if you're consistent throughout the year, you'll actually get further ahead
right,
just because you don't have to spend time trying to make up for all that. You just keep the momentum going. So
mhm,
there's there's so many reasons why you have a lot of time. You have a lot more time than you realize,
mhm,
and you have a lot of advantages because you can structure it any way
mhm.
that you want to. So you have a ton of time.
I also want to address any kind of expectation of when your child should be able to do something. So your you mentioned that your son is 2. At this point, some people might start thinking, oh, by the time he's 3, he should be able to hold a pencil. By the time he's 4, he should be able to read chapter books, any crazy stuff like that. And it's just not true. Just let your son lead and don't worry so much about him holding a pen. Like, write out letters in the sand when he's at the sandbox playing with sand, something very informal, introduce it slowly. And, even if he doesn't learn to read until he's 6, 7, or 8, he's still fine. He still has plenty of time. Or if he's, one of those more advanced readers, he starts reading when he's 2 or 3. That's also great too. And let him explore that. So just don't fall into the trap of following some standard that, we have sort of incorporated in our own thinking from public school days. You know what I'm saying? Just
Oh
just
yeah.
take a breath. You have more time than you think.
Yep. Yeah. So so what would you say to the parents that are both working full-time jobs and want to homeschool their kids?
I want to say it's still doable because I knew this mom who was a single parent who worked full time and homeschooled her boy.
Wow.
So, as we mentioned before, school, the actual academic part of school really doesn't take that long. Someone mentioned to me early on that if a child was never educated, within 4 years could learn everything that is required to finish high school. There's really not that much
Well,
academic knowledge that needs to be squeezed in their head.
why don't you maybe you can comment on like I think what I'm picking up on is the idea of there's an image that people who don't homeschool think literally it has to be the parent the whole time, but
Oh,
like
oh, okay,
co-ops
okay.
and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
leveraging other types of institutions,
Okay,
if you are working,
gotcha.
things that you can do.
Okay, so there are they're kind of like part-time private schools, and you can find them in most cities, I think. Basically, you would send your child to school picking classes a la carte, and it's generally 2 days a week. And then the other 3 days they do their homework at home under your supervision, and that's it. And so if if parents are working and they can do carpooling to the school 2 days a week, they still have a ton of control over what is being taught to their kids. And then the other 3 days, if they have a babysitter that is just basically monitoring the kids' homework, making sure it's done, that's also homeschooling. So it doesn't have to be the parents teaching any of
You're
the subjects at all. You're basically like the orchestra conductor. You pull together the resources for your child, and there's just a huge range of possibilities that you can explore.
I was gonna ask, what does homework look like and for a homeschooled kid?
That depends on who you talk to. If you talk to if you talk to an unschooler, I don't even think they do homework. If you talk to a classically trained, sort of the people who follow this classic method, then they would have a ton of homework, like a lot of writing and handouts and math worksheets and things like that. So again, it goes back to what is your goal for schooling your kids? If math is very important to you, then obviously you can just have them do lots of math sheets or math games or things like that. If, for example, performing arts is very important to you, your family, then they can participate a lot of time in that, and their homework becomes memorizing lines, for a Shakespearean play or making a costume. You can even put them in what they call like sort of hobby classes, and then their homework is, bake a cake or write a recipe or write a script for something. There there's so many. Well, the link that I provided you, Caleb, describes these different methods, and they have really wonderful resources, like links to additional resources that will explain. But one of them is called unit studies, and unit studies is where you basically delve into a subject and you just take everything from it that you can: English, math, science, literature, anything, and it's subject based. And in that case, their homework would look very, very different from somebody who's going through the classical system where they're writing pages and pages of um, worksheets.
Yeah, it's your choice.
Hmm.
The homework is going to be up to you. Do you want it to
Hmm.
be the unschooling nothing, or do you want it to be 10 times as intense as anything in public school, or somewhere in between? You have to figure out what you want to do, and then you also probably want to adapt it to the kid's personality, because
Yeah.
some students are going to learn better with one method versus another.
Yeah, so some of the examples of different kinds of homework that I've had my kids do is, like, if we went to a museum, I would give them a sketchbook and they would sketch something and write a little blurb about the exhibit. And they would do that several times throughout the museum, and that's their homework. But it's also a field trip, right? I've taken them to like a blue heron nesting ground, and looking through binoculars, they would try to sketch the bird and describe something that they see in that environment, and that's a biology homework. Other times they've gone on like hikes through the woods, and they would collect wildflowers and try to identify them. Or they would go out to your yard and they would put a piece of paper against the bark and they would scratch the bark, so they can identify the tree with the bark pattern and also with leaves, things like that. I mean, there you can get so creative with it. It's really actually very wonderful.
Yeah, I want to get into these steps that you had sent me about where to even get started when it comes to figuring out the homeschooling journey. And the reason that I kind of have gotten to this point is because as you were talking, I was thinking about it. Just seems like it seems so flexible. It seems like I can do a million different things, but at
Yeah.
the reality is we're all basically our children are all federally required to be educated, right? So isn't
Right.
there some sort of standard that by which we have to prove that our kids are being educated? I mean, so at some
That
point we
depends.
have to bend to those rules, right?
It depends on where you live, actually. So the first link that I gave you is the one that goes to the Homeschooler Legal Defense Association, and they have a wonderful resource that is listed by the state
Yeah, that
for
was
the
a really cool
requirements.
website.
Yeah, that's a really cool website. For example, in Indiana, you don't even have to tell the state that you're homeschooling. Literally, it's just you decide and you just do it. Versus, I'm sure California has a ton of requirements. New Hampshire, I think, is in a red zone. But we've gone through several different states with different requirements. For example, in Ohio, we were required to either submit our child's work portfolio for the year for review, for like a teacher review, or have them take a standardized test. In Iowa, 10 years ago, I don't think they have any rules now, but 10 years ago, it was required that a person came and visited our house. Like they came and met the kids and looked at their surroundings, and it was actually very intrusive. But they say, "Oh, it's because we want to help you." But so they would interview the kids
Wow.
and they would interview me and what have you done and blah blah blah. Let me see their work, kind of thing. And then in right where we are in Kentucky, the requirement is that we submit a letter to let the school board know that we're homeschooling, and then they just have a list of subjects that they want you to study, all the stuff that you will want your kids to know anyway. History, math, English, science, history, that type of stuff. So you just have to go to that website and just go to your state and make sure that you're following the requirements in your state.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for answering that. It was kind of a yeah, it was kind of a leading question because I knew that was part of your steps, and I had gone through the website, and it was
Mhm,
fantastic because so we're down in Florida, and I clicked the state of Florida, and it basically gave me all of the steps that
yeah,
would be required depending on the educational sort of legal structure that I choose. So first
right.
of all, there's like a legal structure that your type of homeschooling kind of falls under. So there's like homes like the true homeschooling where the parents in charge of everything, or at least this is the way it's in Florida, where the parents
Mhm,
kind of in charge of everything. So you're submitting all the documents and this sort of thing. But then there's also like this private umbrella type of homeschooling. So you can, this means you just hire some sort of like registered institution organization, and they are the ones that submit the paperwork for you,
mhm,
and they in charge of the curriculum and all that kind of stuff. And I remember learning, now that I saying this out loud, I remember learning about something similar to this. I think it was on Daniel Prince's once bitten podcast, where he was talking to somebody who basically they were the umbrella organization, but yet they
mhm.
didn't do any of the teaching. So they basically acted as a person who would submit things for you. So,
Interesting.
even stuff like that where, you know,
Mhm,
you can still be in control of the children's education entirely, but you don't have
mhm,
to go through the nonsense of
mhm,
submitting all the paperwork, which is, just to me is just silly that that we're basically required as as parents to meet all of these expectations,
mhm.
governed by the state, and they change so frequently. I mean, clearly they're just
Right.
totally subjective, and
Yeah.
nobody's actually qualified to be making these decisions. So, um,
Right.
no more nobody's actually qualified any more than the parent is to be making these decisions for these kids.
Exactly.
So it's just, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I had one more thing I wanted to ask you on that, and I can't remember. Do you guys have anything that I brought up as I was talking?
I think the what you were referencing, um, the institution that you can send your kid to and then they do the paperwork. I have not experienced that, but that actually sounds very interesting. But I think it's actually really positive that if you look at the map on that website, that there are green states. There are numerous green states where you don't have to do anything. It's just you're in charge of your children's education. I love
Yeah,
that. I love that
yeah,
freedom.
yeah, for sure. And if one of those states is becoming an increasingly Bitcoin friendly state, that's all the more reason to move there,
Yeah,
right?
right. Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Cool. So let's really quick go through the other couple steps. I don't think we talked about them. So the second one is to find out what activities you can start incorporating at your home. And that's a link to the Homeschools Buyers Club.
Right. So I landed on that. I've used that website when I was schooling my kids, although I ended up pulling a lot of curriculum together myself. But I really like the fact that they give you a starting point. So if you're going in to this homeschooling thing completely fresh and you don't know where to start, they have a quiz that you can take. And they ask you, I think, like 10, 15 questions, and then they just pop up with some options. And honestly, no matter how much you know, and you end up choosing, or you don't know and end up choosing, your child's going to be the one who's going to decide if it works for him or her, right? And so it's just a good starting point. They make a recommendation, you go, okay, let's try it, it's step one. It's step one of thousands of steps. So that's just a starting point. Going down the road, I mean, you'll end up having a whole lot more uh knowledge base to make different choices. So that's just, I believe, a good starting point for just a very overwhelming amount of resources out there that's available to homeschoolers now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then finally, the third step, and again, I'm going to have the link to this little get started guide that's
Mhm,
hosted on your guys' website, freemarketkids.com. And that
mhm.
final step is to find out what style of homeschooling you want to pursue.
Right, going forward. So right now, don't worry too much about it, which is why I had the homeschooler buyer club as as a second step. Just try anything and just kind of feel it out. But going forward, knowing what styles are available, I think it will just give you somewhat of a framework to think along, um, as you're getting feedback from your kid, what might work for them and for yourself, for you and your spouse. So it has a really great sort of pros and cons comparison of the I think it's the seven most popular homeschooling styles out there. And I love the links that they provide under each style because I know those resources. Because like I mentioned before that I'm sort of a tiger mom and I'm a little bit on the crazy side. So instead of choosing one math curriculum for my kids, I chose like 3 or 4 because I was not gonna miss anything, right? I was gonna cover all the bases. So I did everything. So
Probably a lesson in there
it
too.
did, yeah, there's in there that we're not going to get into right now. But but I literally have gone to all those different links and I have tried all of those different things on my own kids. So that's
Wow.
just a really great article as an overview.
Yeah, that's so cool. Guys, the last question that I've been asking all of my guests as this is a podcast about parenting. What would you guys say has been so far the number one lesson? If there's one lesson that you could say your kids have taught you, what would that be?
I would say don't make assumptions about their motivation. So example, I mean, how many times have we seen a child go through like a store or something and is crying because he or she wants something that the parent's like, no, 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 we're not gonna get that, right? So there are several ways of approaching it, and I think we've all seen the parent who gets angry and shouts at the child and yanks the toy out of his hand and, "We're going home," kind of thing, right? What is the assumption there? Are we assuming the child is being unreasonable? Are we assuming the child is being bratty? Are we assuming the child does not understand that it costs money? Like, they're based on our assumptions, we can react differently, right? So I heard years ago this example that was given by Tony Robbins. Some guy on the New York subway was observing a father who was just kind of staring into space, and his children are being really loud and jumping around and just causing havoc to the other passengers. And he was sitting there silently judging the father and going, "Why isn't he doing something? This is just he's so irresponsible." Well, then after that, he was talking to the father and realized that his wife had just passed away. They were just coming away from the hospital. He was in shock. The kids didn't know what to do, so they were acting out. So that difference of a understanding completely changed his attitude toward the father and the children, right? So going back to the store, if we make a different assumption about why the child is throwing a fit, we will react differently. And I think that is the biggest lesson I have come away from the last 20 years of parenting is just be careful of what you're assuming when you react to your children.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Did I
Oh,
explain that?
absolutely. I think that's a
Yeah.
no, I think that's a fantastic lesson because I'm already noticing that myself. When
Mm,
for me, a big assumption is disrespect, and I think I kinda
mhm.
picked this up from my parents, so I feel like
Yeah.
whenever I would act out, it would be taken as disrespect, like a deliberate disrespect of them, and, I feel that kind of program getting relaunched oftentimes when my son is doing something wrong. I know, of course,
Yeah.
or yeah, quote unquote wrong, but of course, he's only 2 years old, so at this point, he doesn't even know what disrespect is. He doesn't even know really
Right.
what respect is, you know?
Right, right, right.
So you're right. There's, like, the assumptions that we make basically subconsciously, and
Mhm,
from a spiritual standpoint, what's very important is that you connect with your higher self, and you observe those programs, and you just let them flow. You don't judge them, you don't try to suppress them, but you try to what's helpful for me is if I try to understand them, because when I understand them, just like I'm doing right now, where I'm explaining it out loud to you guys, I have to have a level of rational understanding of these programs. And when I'm able to understand them, I can see how they're meaningless, how I can see how sometimes they're ridiculous. I can see how sometimes they're based in an unfounded fear, you know? So
mhm,
again,
mhm.
this is why parenting is just as much about our growth as it is about the kids.
Oh, yeah, definitely, definitely agree with that. Yep. What do you think, Scott?
Scott, what about you?
Yeah. I was going to say humility, but I think what you described fits in that kind of umbrella.
Mhm,
Yeah, I
I
think
mean, it's
humility is a
very
great word for it.
your parenting itself is just if you take it seriously, I think most people do. Give people the benefit of the doubt. It can feel overwhelming. You have a little life that you're responsible for. A lot of things are not in your control. If your kid is sick, that's not in your control. If your kid has an accident, that's not in your control. If your kid struggles learning something, there's you're and they're going to have their own opinions too, which they'll let you know about. By the time they're 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, they're gonna have their own point of view in the world. So to me, it all kind of comes back to it's parenting does not revolve around you. it's
mhm,
a it's a
mhm,
it's a very humbling experience, and I think that's why people say they learn more from their kids than they taught their kids.
mhm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, those are great.
Oh, I just wanna add something, Caleb.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
just wanna
Go
add
ahead.
something. I just came across this book called I Hear You. I forget the name of the author, but if you type it in, Amazon, I'm sure it'll pop up. It's a very short book, and it just talks about validating people's feelings. You don't validate the action, but you validate their feelings. And I thought about that, and I really like that sort of framework when you're parenting. When your child, let's say, is throwing a fit, going back to the store, you can shout at him and make and shame him about how he's feeling, or you can validate that he's upset, but then redirect his attention elsewhere, you know? So
Yeah.
validating their feelings, I think that's really
not
important.
not to be confused with just spoiling them and giving what they
Yeah,
want.
don't give
But
them what
you
they
Mhm.
want,
you're
but
just acknowledging their feelings.
yeah, you're like, "Oh, you're very upset. We can see that you're very upset."
You're still not getting the toy.
Right, and then you say bye-bye to the
Right.
bear,
Yeah, I
you know,
agree.
"We'll see him next time," that
Right.
kind of thing.
Right. I mean, it's really treating them like you would treat an adult in those
Yes.
scenarios. It's like understanding that, you know, there are things that I care a lot about, for instance, Bitcoin. So I'm very, very passionate about Bitcoin. So I can get very, very heated about, things that the Federal Reserve does, for instance.
Right.
And it's just like, so, but my wife, she doesn't care. And so if she were to come to me and I was be like, can you believe what the Federal Reserve just did? And she'd be like, I don't care. That's stupid. Why do you care about that? there's
Right.
no point that's basically what you're telling your kids when you don't validate them. It's like there's no reason to care
Exactly.
about that. And it's very
Exactly.
easy to do. I'm not perfect. In fact, I'm sure I do that more than I even realize, but I'm working on it.
Mhm.
I'm coming to learn how to see, okay, my child has an emotion, something is causing that. He must feel very passionately about something. And all I need to
Right.
do is, is set the boundary and say, I understand that you're feeling this way and it really
Right.
sucks, but it's just the
Right.
way that it is.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Well, this has been an awesome conversation, and I would love to do it. We'll have to do another one where we can talk specifically about conscious parenting and that sort of stuff. Outside of the homeschooling stuff. So let's talk a
Yeah.
little bit about some of the resources you guys have. I want to talk about the books and the games that you guys have.
Yeah, Scott.
Sure. Well, the books I just happen to really like games. I grew up with them, and in hindsight, I would say, listen, they 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 have a lot of fellowship. You're present with somebody as opposed to just looking at screens and things like that. There's some other benefits to it, but in context of what we're talking about here, it was just something that I was hoping we would do as a family, and because we were passionate about the education, we just kept looking for resources to be creative. It could be different activities to bring kids to, it could be different experiences. And when it came to the games, it was what's out there that we can yet come up with a yet another way of doing it. So for example, we had our kids play Cash Flow, which was the Robert Kiyosaki game to help teach about um, cash flow and business, entrepreneurship,
Yeah, I've heard a
financial
lot of good
statements.
things about that game.
There's a lot of things in it, and one of the things I personally struggled with that is that it teaches a lot, which is good. However, it wasn't fun. It was dragging the kids through as if I don't know. It was not a it wasn't one of those things where they said, "Oh, can we take that out?" So the games that I work on developing, I'm trying to reach a balance where there's something in it that you can teach, some point that you can get across. For example, in Huddle Up, it's how does Bitcoin work? But I also wanted it to be balanced that it's playable. It's something that maybe it's not the next Monopoly or Catan, but it's not something that you literally have to drag people across coals and broken glass to get them to play. And that was the balance. The thing that I thought was missing though is if you want to go deeper, then who and you don't know that subject, then what do you do? Now you're kind of back to the earlier part of the discussion where you feel like you have to go and learn things. So my vision is just to continue to, as there's so many different rabbit holes to go down to, is to continue to develop games, but then to write a book with each of those for people like Tali who are going to want to teach more, is to just have that guide that with them. So you don't have to feel overwhelmed about learning a new subject. You can play the game, learn the rules, play the game with your kids, and then you have a resource that's literally at your hand that points you to other resources so that it can accelerate your learning, or you can point your kids to it. You can do it for yourself. It's just to take it to the next level for those that want to. And for those that don't, that's fine. Just play the game. Don't worry about it. An example of that is when I play with my family, we've been trying to get them to become Bitcoiners. We haven't succeeded yet. However, my brother, who helped me game test for the last 2 years, he certainly understands the difference between a hot and cold wallet, and that you really want to get your Bitcoin into a protected place. And so now something like FTX comes up and people throw things at you and they're saying, "Hey, are you worried about Bitcoin?" I'm like, "No, I'm really kind of happy to flush out the junk in the system,
Yeah.
and you should never ever put your Bitcoin in you should not be on exchange. You should self custody." And then I can relate it to the game. This is just like moving your Bitcoin tokens from the hot wallet to the cold wallet where they're protected. So he doesn't have to read the book. But if someone like Tali had say she said, "Oh, I want a resource to help teach my kids this. I want to learn about money," and had the game and had the book, she could basically that becomes her curriculum. "Hey guys, we're going to play this once a week or whatever." I don't know what it would be. But it's available for those that want to go deep, but I can still have conversations without being that guy who just everybody just kind of rolls their eyes and says, "Oh, that's the Bitcoin guy. He won't shut up about it. Don't get him started. He's going to tell me about whatever, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever." And and I've seen it. I mean, we're class of 21, so we haven't been in the space that long, but it's really easy to see. You go to a meetup and there's somebody who's relatively new, somebody who's heard a lot of podcasts, and they just dump on them. Here's hard money, and here's this, and here's that. And you can watch the reaction of the person on the other side, and they're at best they're confused. At worst, they're turned off, and they don't want to hear anymore because you just sound like you're a nut.
Yep.
And to me, like the medium is, look, guys, we're just play a game. That's it. We're just gonna play. And if you have a question, like why do the number of pieces get cut in half 3 times in the game? Why you have this halving thing? Okay, well, fine. That's your introduction. You can talk about halving events. If they don't worry about it. And to me, so going to your question about the games and the books, the vision is there are so many things that we have learned about over the last 2 years. We really want our kids to know, we want our family to know. We want to share that with other people, and not everybody is willing to listen to 10,000 hours of podcasts and read, 100 books and whatnot. They're just not going to you're not going to do that. And so for me, it's kind of giving where in an area that I like games, so I'm going to build games and I'm going to build the books that go with them, and then we're going to introduce those to people, and hopefully they'll get through, and somebody will play that will basically become more open-minded because of it. I don't want to use names, but we just had an experience like this. We were actually at a small meetup, and there was someone there who was the least experienced person in the world in the group, sorry, and they started out really why am I here kind of thing, and after they played the game, they were excited. They were into it, they were asking questions, and I'm like, "Okay, something clicked there," and it wasn't "I'm gonna just turn on the fire hose and drown you with all kinds of memes and other things that just to overwhelm you." So the mission is to help educate about a lot of different areas, but to try to do it in a fun way and to make it easy by providing the books for the people who want a little extra to get them started. So that's the vision. So
Oh, that's so cool. You're taking a kind of like a passive learning tool. You're designing a passive learning tool, whereas, so much of Bitcoin education so far has been very active. You have to listen to the podcast or read the book or engage with the community, but this is very much very passive. If you like to play a game, then do it. So yeah, I take it to, get yourself the games and because you have two games, right? You have Huddle Up, and what was the other one?
we have another one's called "Is That the Best You to Do?" I have that up. I need to order some. That one is out of stock because I need to order some
Hmm.
parts for it. That is um, a negotiation game. It's based on some basic supply and demand concepts, and from an Austrian economics standpoint, think of price as a communication tool. The thing is, I built that game before I understood Austrian economics. So I haven't written the book that's going to go with that one yet, but that's going to be the angle for it. There's a third game on the website called BIP 39. And the intent of that game is to help teach what seed phrases are. It's much, much simpler than the Bitcoin game because it's focused only on seed phrases. That one is basically available for pre-order, but it's still we're still, game testing that one. So that one will not be available for, it's gonna be mid to late year before I really have that one complete. And then we have another dozen ideas for other games behind that. So we're just gonna have to prioritize which one to focus on. So this year, I want to get the two that I just mentioned to you up, and then we have a lot of ideas for once we get some more momentum with that to go into next year.
Very cool. Yeah. So we'll keep an eye out for those to be ready to go. But I'd say take the board game to your meetup, and just engage with people in a different way, play a game with them, and
I think as a newcomer myself, who struggled a lot with trying to understand exactly what Bitcoin is, the game is best used as an icebreaker because there are some people who are dragged to meetups
Mm,
by their significant other and they really don't care, don't want to be there. But if they have fun with the game, as we have observed, the many places that we've played with people, if they have fun with the game, they will ask questions afterwards. And that's the
mm,
start, right? That's you have to have the desire to seek out more information. And so if you can't even get them interested, then there is no conversation. So this
yeah.
game is just really a great
w-
tool for being an icebreaker.
Right. And then some people have said they once they learned about the game, the actual Bitcoiners learned about it. They purchased it specifically because they wanted to have that experience that you just described with their family.
Yeah.
So they said, I want to help my family understand what I do or what what I'm into with this Bitcoin thing. And they were struggling with different ways of making inroads there. So they purchased the game so that they could have that conversation. You could slowly introduce those concepts again without being the one coming in there and saying, like the old memes about have fun being poor,
Right,
whatever they are. Like
exactly.
that's not going to help. That's not going to help them. But if you, but there, it's kind of two things that I agree, Caleb. The idea of bringing it to meetups. We just started a meetup here in Louisville, and we just have we're going to put out the first event. We just have to get the final details with the location. But the meetup is set up, and we do intend to bring the game there. And I know that Matt has said that he would like to have a game night at Bitcoin Park. So we're looking forward to getting it out with the meetups. So I think you're spot on there. The feedback from the people who have played it who are Bitcoiners is they want it so that they can play with their families
Mhm,
to help have those conversations because it's so different.
mhm.
Right. I mean, I liked it. I was interested. My undergrad is in engineering, and I still struggled when I was first trying to grasp like what is this thing. So trying to go to my parents and saying, here's this, blockchain and here's how it works and there's a difficulty adjustment, all these other things. They're gonna there's no way it's gonna get in. They're not gonna be able to absorb it. But if I can get them to play the game, I can have at least starter conversations. Hey,
Right.
this is why it's different. This is why you want cold storage. I can have very basic things, and that's better than where they were before they played.
Right. So you can use this game to plant a seed, right? So we played this game with some college kids, and they were not immediately converted. They had a lot of fun with the game, but we know going forward, if they hear Bitcoin in conversation, they're going to have some basic understanding,
Mm,
and that's where it starts. And then one day when they decide that there is a good reason for them to pursue it further, they wouldn't be starting from ground zero.
mm.
And if we preach at them,
Oh yeah.
which is really easy for people who already understand to do, then they're not even going to pay attention. So,
Yeah. Preaching does not help. I mean, some people learn Bitcoin because they get burned. There's some Canadian truckers, I'm sure that a very different view of Bitcoin now than
mhm,
before.
mhm.
But wouldn't it be nice to be able to reach people before they get burned?
Yeah.
So that again, going back to the vision though, the Bitcoin game has seemed to really hit a mark with the people we've played with. I was nervous about that because I'd only played it with family and friends that didn't know Bitcoin, but
right, yeah,
we've had a very positive. Obviously, you the podcast you referenced, we've had a very positive. Um, we've had positive feedback about what people have been able to do with it, and enjoying it. So we're just gonna try to spread it to as many people as we can. we'll get the book out here. That we have a preliminary copy of the book. There's some final things with formatting I have to wrap up. I'll be out by next month, and then we're going to go on to the next game, and we're going to try to build up a portfolio I call it game schooling. I guess it's not really, it doesn't have to be homeschooling. You could do any kind of schooling you want, but imagine having working fellowship and family time into your routine, and you had some games that were fun to play, but also had some other things. So we there's just so many rabbit holes to teach that I don't think we're ever going to run out of ideas. So we're very excited about it, and um, we're really happy to be able to talk to folks like yourself. And if anybody, we're really quite open and talking with people. So people have reached out to Tali about questions on homeschooling. So same thing goes with the game. If people want to talk about game schooling, be more than happy to talk with them, to talk about some ideas about what they might be able to do to work that into their education for their kids or themselves.
And what's the best way to reach you guys?
So the email is happy to help at Free Market Kids, and you can also we're on Twitter. You have my you and I connected initially on Twitter, right? So if you can put that out there, it's just Scott Limburg 93, and we have a Free Market Kids Twitter, which is literally just Free Market Kids, and then we also have a Twitter account for, it's called Kentuckiana Bitcoin Club. So it shows up as Kentuckiana BTC. I got to check on that. I might have the
No,
handle. We
it's
have
right. It's right.
Kentuckiana BTC.
Mhm.
So those are three different Twitter ways that you can also reach out to me by DM if you want.
Tali, I also wanted to mention, I know you haven't done it yet, but you are thinking about starting a podcast to teach people.
I am. Yeah.
So if you wanted to expand on that, you can go ahead.
It's an idea that I've been toying with for a while now, and my thought is to interview parents who have at least one child that has graduated homeschooling, so they have the benefit of hindsight, and have them sort of go through their memory and make recommendations based on having seen the finished product. I really want to focus on the experience part of it because I feel like there are too many people who learn something quickly and then immediately turn around and spread the idea without actually seeing it play out. So that's what I was thinking. And also, I have the idea of inviting homeschoolers who have graduated and sort of distorting their voice and interviewing them so they can give really honest feedback about their experiences. So these are a few ideas I'm toying with. I don't have anything set up just yet. Still experimenting.
The audience would be the folks that
The
are,
audience would be people who are in the beginning stages of schooling.
Yep, like me.
Like, yeah.
Yeah,
I will
yeah,
let you
yeah,
know when I publish the podcast.
yeah, yeah. You had kind of explained it when you'd mentioned it to me on Friday. You had said that this is more going to be in the weeds kind of details. What we talked
Yes.
about today is a lot higher level, and
Yes.
you're really going to be talking nuts and bolts and actually
Yes.
relaying some very specific experiences and lessons to your audience. And I think that there's a huge need for that. I think that a ton of people would get a lot of value from it. So I'm
Yeah.
excited
I'm
to start
glad. Yeah.
listening when
And
you're
I
ready.
really I really want it to be case study based and story based and something very, very easy to listen to. And for parents to hear something short and then just kind of pre-plan their day a little bit. I have heard when I was like knee deep in this whole thing and not getting enough sleep and just so tired and just losing my temper all the time. And I was desperate to get help with not like exploding on my kids because I was so frustrated and tired. And I heard someone say, "Well, you gotta pre-plan your reaction to things that happen over and over again, if they fight. If you wake up in the morning and you already say, okay, if the children fight today, how am I going to respond to them? Like pre-plan just a little bit, not necessarily, in detail, but just if my son throws a fit when I'm trying to get him to do the multiplication table, how am I going to react to that? And just pre-plan your reactions. You have a much, much better chance of staying in control of yourself when you're trying to get something done, your kids are not cooperating. So really want my podcast to be case study based and story based and real life scenario based. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's going to be great. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I feel like we could
You're
talk forever.
welcome.
So your
Yeah, we
experience and
can.
your
We can
pers
definitely
We can,
talk
we
for
really, yeah,
case
we
study.
really
uh,
could. I mean, you just have
Yeah.
such enlightening experience and perspectives that not a lot of people have. So I want to acknowledge your bravery to kind of go down this uncommon path and
Thank you.
your work ethic. I mean, you guys sound like you have put a lot of time and energy and work to your kids, and your kids are going to be so grateful for that. I'm sure already are very grateful for that. So
well, we
that's awesome.
appreciate the kinds. We're very grateful that you reached out to us, and we're looking forward to staying in contact on these journeys. It looks like we have a couple things in common, well, at least with the
Yeah,
goals
for
here,
sure.
maybe
Yeah.
different stages, but certainly
Yeah.
the same goals. So
Yeah.
we just want to say thanks for reaching out, and we're looking forward to